nails are all, I chipped a nail and my dress has dirt on it and the prince isn't gonna think I'm beautiful.
Hey everyone, it's Aaron and Heidi, the Book Brood, and today we're going to bring you our worst/disappointing of 2016. We don't have an even number between us. I have 5, she has 9, so we'll go ahead and get started, and you can go ahead and start off.
Okay, I'm gonna count down, and most of these I don't have physical copies of because they were disappointing or horrible, and I didn't want to hold on to them. But number 4, my worst read of the year was Baby Doll, and this was a thriller, and it was supposed to be very suspenseful, and I didn't think it was. I thought that Emma Donoghue did a much better job with Room, and I thought those stories were very similar, but I thought Room was way better, so I was disappointed. I thought it was pretty bad.
Who wrote The Coldest Girl in Cold Town?
Holly Black?
Holly Black. That wasn't that middle grade Holly Black one, was it?
No, Baby Doll, you're thinking Doll Bones.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Baby Doll was the one, there was a teenager who was captured and kept in this guy's basement for
the multiple
years.
perspective one.
Right. The story turned out to be more about the impact on the rest of the family and the victim who was captured and raped and, experienced these horrible things. She was the one who was staying strong for the family.
Oh, yeah, I remember you telling me about that one. Seems unbelievable.
It felt really forced and unbelievable, and I thought Emma Donoghue did a much better job with that story. Coming in at number 3 of my worst reads of the year was City of Bones by Cassandra Clare, the first in the Mortal Instruments. This took me a long time to get through because it was just so flat and so bland, and so I went into this expecting something amazing because BookTube loves this author and this series, and I thought it was pretty awful. The ending, like the last chapter, was enough to kind of get me a little bit engaged with the story, but not enough to make up for like 300 pages of just a vanilla beige blah story.
All right, my worst of 2016 was Flatland: A Romance of Many Dimensions by Edwin A. Abbott. This is a book that's about 120 years old, something like that. 100, yeah, more than 120 years old, but it's very pretentiously written. The pretensions and prejudices of the author just bleed through to all of the characters on this. It's an interesting concept with, a two-dimensional world where the characters are shapes and there's a hierarchy of, how many angles you have, or if you're a circle, you're pretty much top of the food chain, but it's really bad. It's just really bad. Just
the voice, the narrator.
The narrator was just terrible. Like, it just such this like hoity-toity just kind of attitude throughout it, and that book took me about 3 years total to trudge through the whole thing, and it's only about 150 pages.
Wow. Oh yeah, you read me excerpts from that and it was just awful. The number 2 worst read for me of the year was The Program. And this was book 1 in a trilogy, and it was really unfortunate because the first third of the book was fantastic, and I felt all of the emotions, and I was very invested in the story, and then it was like the author got brain damage or something. Like, it was just so different, the last bits of the story, and it was like every horrible trope in YA mashed together, and I had to force myself to finish it, and it was really, really bad. This was really hard for me to decide whether The Program was the worst read of the year or my number 1 was Throne of Glass. And the only reason I did not put Throne of Glass 2 in the program first is because I literally could not even finish Throne of Glass. It was so bad that, they were basically equally as horrible. And those were my worst reads of the year. They were really bad.
And Throne of Glass was even like the main character. Just the
Yeah. This main character who's supposed to be this badass assassin chick. Like, I'm still sexy, though. I can still totally, like, play off of the prince and his, like, guard person there. And they both want me. Like, oh my god, shut up. I'm gonna punch you in your face.
Yeah.
And people were referred to as annoyingly handsome.
Yeah, you're...
Oh my god. Oh my god. So bad. I mean, I'm not saying that an assassin can't be pretty.
Just the way it was presented.
It was just, oh my god.
It sounds painful.
It was
yeah.
So painful.
All right. And then my second worst of 2016 was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. I've ragged on this one a lot recently because I've read it recently, but it's just a classic that didn't hold up. The science in it is pretty common knowledge now, so it spends a lot of time just drilling down on things that you know about and you don't need to have a whole explanation of. Yeah, and just long, boring conversations between the main character and Captain Nemo. And really the most exciting parts that I knew were coming in the book weren't really all that exciting, and they didn't pay off for the boring parts.
That's unfortunate.
It is.
So this was hard to narrow down because I had kind of two categories. Disappointing in they were overhyped books, and then also disappointing in that there was something... I'm not usually one for trigger warnings, but I felt like these two books should have had trigger warnings because I was not the target audience for this, and I did not like reading them. So my overhyped books that were disappointing, number one was The Vegetarian by Han Kang. I think that was her name. And this was the, she won the Man Booker Prize for this book. I think it was last year, 2015. And it was making the rounds all through BookTube, and everyone was saying how gorgeous it was and how beautiful and how, like, I don't know. I didn't get it. I read it, and I didn't connect with the story like a lot of people were. I felt like it was so overhyped. I was expecting this beautiful, gorgeous story that was just going to be hauntingly beautiful, and it was just weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have found, though, that I'm not a person who particularly cares for that award, for the Man Booker Prize winners.
What's the criteria of it?
I haven't looked them up, but I have read several finalists, and I don't get it.
So then I'm on to my disappointing, and so third most disappointing is The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. Overhyped, just very overhyped book. I loved Fahrenheit 451, but this was just, it was just really boring, and the amount of praise it gets just propped it up way too much, and it didn't hold up. And even for a short book, it was a chore, a complete chore to read.
What was this one about?
This one is a bunch of short stories that are about Earthlings going to Mars, and then there's Martians there, and the society's kind of clashing at first, and then humans taking over. But just all the characters were uninteresting, and some of the stories were just trying really hard, and I didn't care. And I mean, it is very beautifully written. Bradbury has a very poetic style, which it's still very beautiful in that, but it doesn't translate to a good story.
Makes sense. Okay, my two other overhyped, disappointing reads are After Party and Our Endless Numbered Days. After Party was more so in just the description sounded great. It didn't really have a lot of ratings, but it was selling itself as a story that it didn't really turn out to be that story. It had some interesting concepts, and I'm really glad I read it. I have never read a book before this that one of the main characters is someone's hallucination. Someone who is schizophrenic and they have a regular hallucination that they talk to, and it's one of the main characters. And I thought that was a fascinating concept, and it was so fun to read. But the rest of the story was a weird, convoluted murder mystery that didn't really matter to me, I guess. And then Our Endless Numbered Days was very overhyped, and it was pushed as this beautiful story with a twist ending that you're never gonna see. I saw the twist a mile and a half away, and it was overly long and drawn out, and the beautifulness and was just like slow for me. It was just a story about a father who abducts his daughter and runs off to the woods and lives there for like 12 years, and then she escapes and comes back to reality, and it's trying to figure out what happened. And it was just long slogs of them in the forest doing forest things, and
for no real reason
No.
at the end of it.
no
Yeah.
reason at the end. No.
Yeah. Fluff for page count.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. And then my second most disappointing is Philip K. Dick's The Man in the High Castle. This one was overhyped too. This is supposedly praised as his best work. This was a bunch of boring, uninspiring characters, boring and uninspiring story events that just never paid off. It's not an interesting story. It's
Many people love this story.
the idea of it is the Axis powers won World War II, and it's the world as it is after that, or the United States as it is after that, where half of it's controlled by Japan, the other half by Germany. There were, I guess, some tidbits of some interesting, things, just cultural things that Americans kind of changed their accent to sort of have a sort of Japanese accent way of speaking English. That was, kind of interesting, but just not there. There was. It just felt like there was nothing there. It ends and it's like, what was that all about? But I did read another Philip K. Dick book. I just finished it, and I'll be talking about it in my December wrap up called Valis, which was amazing. So he is still a great author. I just don't understand why The Man in the High Castle is supposedly his greatest work.
Do you think it's something like The Vegetarian and The Great Gatsby, where there is symbolism and layers of...
I'm sure. But there's all sorts of that in Valis, though. There's also a main character that's a hallucination, too. But
I really liked that.
It was... I'll talk about it in my wrap up, but it was very beautiful. It was very intelligently written.
Okay. And then my last two disappointing reads were the trigger warning ones, where so they were The Girl in 6E by A.R. Torr and Mr. Monster by Dan Wells. And I knew going into this one that there was going to be sex and violence. What I did not know, and I wish I would have known, was that there was going to be pedophilia, and that having young children, young girls, it was so hard to read about, and I really wish that I would have known. There would have been some kind of warning for that. And then Mr. Monster by Dan Wells. I knew that there was going to be graphic scenes of a boy struggling with, trying not to be a serial killer, but having these, violent urges. What I did not expect was there to be such drawn out, long torture porn scenes, basically. Just torture for the sake of unsettling your audience.
All right, my most disappointing of 2016 was Neuromancer by William Gibson. Incredibly overhyped. Perhaps had I read this in the early 90s or in 1980, I was barely alive in the 1980s, but it might have been good then, but it didn't know what it was doing. It didn't know how to write an interesting character. It didn't even know how to transition scene to scene, location to location. A line in a Goodreads review I read for this, and someone else that didn't like it said that it was like he made up description on the spot, and he used an example of, oh yeah, and so he took his chainsaw hands. Oh, did I mention he had chainsaw hands? Yeah, he had chainsaw hands. And a lot of the book felt like that, and it had a made-up language, which I don't mind. I've read plenty of books like that, but it just didn't handle it well, and it just didn't work out. Neil Stevenson writes this type of story better. Richard K. Morgan writes this kind of story better. This started the subgenre, but skip it and go right to the goods.
So who was this one by?
William Gibson.
Have you read anything else by
No.
William Gibson?
No, and I don't think I'm going to.
Yeah. Okay. Those were our disappointing / worst reads of the year.
And so if you want to leave us some comments, if you want to...
let us know what your, like the read that you regret the most, or like the worst or most disappointing, overhyped.
Or if you want to give us some how dare you, comments.
Yeah, if you want to get
go ahead.
mad, just as long as you can do it in a respectful manner. I love controversy and different opinions, and I think that's what's great about BookTube is when we can all have different opinions.
All right, and we'll see you in our next video. Probably going to be goals for 2017.
Yay!
Bye, everyone.